It's an honor and privilege to introduce Donna Marie Murphy, employed and wearing many hats at Eastern Technical High School in Baltimore County Public Schools, school counseling chairperson, National Honor Society advisor, advanced placement coordinator. And in her spare time, she wrote a dissertation on the comparison between handwriting and typing and whether one method produces better recall than the other. Right out of the gate in her 701 stats class, she received an acceptance to present preliminary findings of this work at AERA in 2016. And just last month, she completed the rarely accomplished AERA doubleheader with an acceptance to present the work that you'll be listening to in a few minutes at the upcoming meetings in Denver. Without further ado, Donna, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fenster. That was pretty good. I like that. I want to make sure I'm sharing my screen the right way. So let me make sure that I get the right one in there.
And Donna, can I just interrupt for a quick minute?
Sure.
I'm Patricia Dwyer. I'm one of your readers, but we never officially met. So I just want to tell you that I'm very excited for your project. It was very interesting, and I look forward to hearing you present it.
Thank you so much, and I so appreciate your work with me. Thank you so, so much.
My pleasure.
Can you see my screen? Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to get started. If I talk too fast, Dr. Fenster, give me a yell, okay? Good afternoon, and thank you for your time today. Dr. Dwyer and Dr. Doherty, thank you so much for your patience, time, and wisdom. Your thorough review of my work and your guidance was truly appreciated. Dr. Fenster, I can't begin to thank you enough for everything that you've done. Your expertise has been my support through this daunting process. Thank you for your professional wisdom. I love your elf hat. That makes everything really good. And thank you for being my cheerleader and motivator. I could not have completed this without you. Today, I'm excited to share with you my study. My topic is handwriting and typing, a comparison of note-taking method on recall of novel lecture content. I'm hoping that my overview keeps me on track and helps provide some structure for my presentation for you. So when I was thinking about putting all this together, I was like, why this topic? And it goes back to my class with Dr. Fenster, because it was my topic in his class too. Educators and researchers acknowledge that note-taking is a critical activity and that it is positively correlated with academic success. There's general agreement among educators that students who take notes, especially during academic lectures, tend to recall more factual content, tend to be more focused and attentive, and may also be inclined to review and reflect upon those notes following the lecture, thus improving the possibility of recall. The process of note-taking has rapidly changed in recent years, due in part to affordable, accessible, and portable digital technology available in the schoolhouse, coupled with curricular changes regarding teaching handwriting. Clear evidence of those curricular changes are outlined in the Common Core State Standards, which, as described by Konikova 2014, recommend teaching legible writing, but only in kindergarten and first grade. Professor Audrey Vandermeer from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in 2020 noted that in Norway, some schools have become completely digital and skip handwriting training altogether, and that schools in Finland are even more digitized than in Norway, with very few schools offering any handwriting training at all. My interest in this topic was sparked several years ago as I observed how note-taking has changed during my tenure in education. Paper and pencil is replaced by digital devices in nearly every classroom, including physical education classes. Few high schoolers have ever been exposed to cursive penmanship, and few, if any, of my high schoolers report having ever taken a penmanship class. It is in my opinion, it's these changes that impact students and their ability to recall regarding note-taking. Understanding why and how these changes impact learning is of particular interest to me and may be of interest to educators in general and to those who make decisions that impact education. The goal of my research is to examine handwriting and typing as note-taking modalities while analyzing the influence that these note-taking methods have on recall. An effort was made to support and extend current and past research. This study and subsequent results may provide insights supporting the process of note-taking, especially via handwriting, and may offer support for handwriting to return as a viable and or better note-taking method when attempting to recall information. This diagram provides a visual of the simultaneous complex processes involved with note-taking, whereby the note-taker has to listen, observe, process, synthesize, and then document auditory, visual, and or written verbiage. The means by which note-taking is accomplished, whether by handwriting or typing, may be pivotal to understanding what is remembered and how long that information is maintained in memory. Method of note-taking may affect recall and may influence recall differently. As referenced, note-taking is seen by educators and researchers as an essential activity positively correlated to learning. The process of note-taking, especially in secondary and post-secondary education, now occurs primarily via digital typing. In an effort to understand if method of note-taking impacts recall and which method may offer the best opportunities for recall, it's important to understand the physical and cognitive processes, as well as the advantages and disadvantages of handwriting and typing. Handwriting is a skilled, complex, learned task that, according to Shemin 2014, requires, quote, focused attention, tactile and motor processes of feeling the pen and paper, moving the writing implement, and cognitive activities involved with directing that movement by thought, end quote. The influence that handwriting has on brain activity is noted in multiple current and past note-taking studies. Summarizing the Mangen and Vallée 2010 findings, those researchers report that brain activation occurs during handwriting, specifically in areas of the brain associated with motor perception. They note that the movements associated with writing by hand activate the frontal and temporal areas of the brain and leave a motor memory, and typing does not result in that same brain activation. The mechanics of note-taking via typing are quite different. Typing is more rigid with regards to form, and according to Weston 2011, involves a sort of map, a cognitive map of the keyboard, with focus split between keyboard and screen for user feedback. This bimanual process of typing usually involves both hands and or multiple fingers, and involves picking out the keys or buttons on the keyboard that already have pre-printed letters or symbols. Typing does allow for faster transcription and offers cleaner, clearer notes to review, but does it offer similar brain activation that handwriting affords? Understanding how these differences impact learning was the theme of this research, and again, may be of interest to researchers now, to educators now. My study had two research questions. My research question one was, does one method of modality of handwriting, longhand writing, or digital typing impact recall of novel lecture content? And my research question two was, does the preference for one modality of note-taking, whether it be handwriting or typing, affect recall of information? And my hypothesis was handwriting notes, regardless of note-taking preference, will yield stronger recall results on immediate and long-term or delayed assessment than will typing notes. My research was based upon key theories of note-taking, including the embodied cognition and haptics theory, generative and translational hypotheses, and encoding and external storage hypotheses, which I'm going to explain over the next couple of slides, and which utilizes the frameworks of cognitive and educational psychology. The encoding and external storage hypotheses referenced in the research of Kira 1985, Muller and Oppenheimer 2014, and Bowie et al. 2012 involves the learner as actively processing and reframing information into their own words through the physical act of taking notes. External storage hypothesis refers to having an actual external storage location, that notebook or digital file, to reference later. These theorists acknowledge the general benefit of note-taking, with Kira and Muller and Oppenheimer suggesting that handwriting notes activates more cognitive processing because of the focused and deliberate engagement of the note-taker. The generative hypothesis of note-taking suggests that learning improves when the learner summarizes and visualizes connecting that new information to their own prior information or prior knowledge. And translational hypothesis suggests that learning is activated when information is transformed. For example, when taking lecture notes, transcribing that auditory information to text, pictures, graphs, diagrams helps recall. Major theorists supporting this framework include Conway and Gathercall, 1990, Whitrock, 1974, and Richardson and LaCroix, 2023. These researchers suggested that taking notes in general promotes integration of new information to prior knowledge and promotes deeper learning and ultimately supports recall. Aligning with embodied cognition and haptics theory, our researchers James and Engelhardt, 2012, Longcamp et al., 2005 and 2006, Mangen and Valet, 2010, and Vanderweel and Vandermeer, 2024. Embodied cognition considers how the brain and body work together, suggesting that cognitive processes are connected through physical activities and interaction of the body. And haptics theory focuses on how touch and feedback from tactile interactions affect learning. Using fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imagery studies, to study brain area activation in children while they completed handwriting and typing tasks, James and Engelhardt, 2012, found that handwriting activated areas of the brain associated with memory and motor control, and typing letters did not result in that same brain activation. Conducting experimental studies regarding note-taking modalities and the role of handwriting in letter recognition, the studies of Longcamp et al., 2005 and 2006, yielded results showing that handwriting supports better recognition and recall of letters than does typing due to the physical movements associated with the handwriting. Conducting comparative studies, Mangen and Valet found that the singular focus of handwriting provided a stronger connection between notes and note-taker, and that this unimanual form of note-taking provided a more tactile structure for the note-taker compared to the divided attention required in typing. And using longitudinal studies, Vanderweel and Vandermeer, 2024, used neuroimaging electroencephalography on participants with results showing that fine motor skills associated with handwriting helped form the cognitive neural pathways necessary for higher order cognitive processes, necessary for recall and learning. Typing did not result in that same cognitive activity. These researchers highlight the benefit of handwriting over typing for important cognitive processing. The physical interactions, movements, activity, and tactile connections of handwriting over typing promotes brain activation, enhancing those cognitive processes, ultimately affecting recall. So our study had 82 adult participants who were randomly assigned to complete note-taking tasks, and they were assigned to one of four groups. They had a preference for handwriting and were assigned to the handwriting task, a preference for handwriting assigned to the typing task, a preference for typing assigned to handwriting, and a preference for typing assigned to typing. Participants viewed a video lecture of ancient Roman architecture, which was assumed to be a novel topic for these participants. They were then administered immediate and then a week later delayed assessments. And the independent variables were note-taking method and preference. Dependent variables were quiz score, immediate and delayed, and a statistical analysis of variance was utilized. My methodology was similar to that utilized through the studies of Bowie et al. 2012, Muller and Oppenheimer 2014, and Mangen and Valet 2010. The Bowie et al. 2012 study utilized experimental design where participants were instructed to complete note-taking tasks utilizing either modality of handwriting or typing during a lecture. Muller and Oppenheimer in 2014, that study employed an experimental methodology for immediate and delayed recall where participants were randomly assigned to either handwriting or typing tasks, and participants watched video lectures taking notes similarly to the way they would in class. And the Mangen and Valet 2010 study involved participants learning novel letters. One group used typing, the other group used handwriting, and they employed the paired t-test and analysis of variance, and their results also supported embodied cognition and haptics principles. So my results were pretty good. Participants of my research were randomly assigned to either handwriting or note-taking conditions, and my table that you see in front of you reflects the distribution of participants into the 4 conditions. 76 of my adult participants indicated that their preference for note-taking was handwriting, and 24% of the participants indicated their preference was for typing. The largest group of respondents used typing but indicated they preferred handwriting with an N of 32, and the smallest group was assigned typing and indicated a preference for typing, which that N was 6. So my results showed that the group that took handwritten notes and had a preference for handwriting had the highest assessment score on the immediate assessment, which was given right after they recorded their notes. The group that preferred handwriting but was assigned to typing yielded the lowest assessment scores on their immediate assessment. And the differences reported in the figure were statistically significant with a P of 0.01 and eta squared 0.13, meaning a medium effect size. Results for the delayed assessment yielded the following. The group that used handwriting and had a preference for typing had the highest score on the delayed assessment, and participants indicating handwriting preference but assigned to typing task yielded the lowest on the delayed assessment. And the differences reported in this figure were also statistically significant with 0.001 and eta squared 0.20, meaning a large effect size. There were 2 statistically significant post hoc tests for the immediate assessment, as indicated in the figure. The 18% difference between participants who preferred handwriting and used handwriting when compared to those who preferred handwriting and typed notes of 0.018, and the 15% difference between participants who had a preference for typing but used handwriting when compared to those who had a handwriting preference but took notes typing was 0.026. A homogeneity of variance test showed unequal variance. So Games and Howell post hoc test was used to assess whether the differences reported in the figure were statistically significant. And there were 4 statistically significant post hoc tests from the figure regarding the delayed assessment. Comparing, for example, those who preferred handwriting and used handwriting to those who took their notes typing and preferred typing, as well as comparison of the other groups versus each other, results of the Games-Howell post hoc test showing the comparison between groups yielded a P of 0.001, reflecting 30% to 34% difference as indicated in the data that you see before you. Both groups utilizing typing as their note-taking practice for this research experienced a decrease in their quiz 2 score by at least 10 percentage points compared to their quiz 1 score. Both groups utilizing handwriting increased their scores slightly on quiz 2 compared to quiz 1. The 15% difference found for participants who preferred to take notes digitally but took handwritten notes in quiz 1 more than doubled to 33% in quiz 2. Results show support for my core hypothesis, which was note-taking modality of handwriting will result in greater recall of novel lecture content compared to the note-taking modality of typing. And results of the core hypothesis held up after controlling for preference as reported by participants. So handwriting notes resulted in greater recall of novel lecture content. Participants taking notes by handwriting scored higher than those taking notes digitally on immediate assessment. The finding holds irrespective of the participant's preference regarding their modality of note-taking. Results show the gap further increased between those who took handwritten notes and those who took notes digitally for the delayed assessment. Theories of note-taking, including the encoding and external storage hypotheses, generative and translational hypotheses, and embodied cognition and haptics theory that I referenced earlier, highlighted through key researchers Longcamp et al. 2005 and 2006, Richardson and LaCroix 2023, Muller and Oppenheimer 2014, Mangen and Valet 2010, and Vanderweel and Vandermeer 2024 support our findings that handwriting notes is a means to improve and support recall. Our research reinforces the findings of these key theories and theorists regarding the positive value of note-taking and highlight the beneficial effect that handwriting has in note-taking for recall. Vanderweel and Vandermeer 2024 addressed the importance of the body-brain and haptics connection in their research, stating, quote, "Thus, the ongoing substitution of handwriting by typing in almost every educational setting may seem somewhat misguided, as it could affect the learning process in a negative way. Findings suggest that the intricate and precisely controlled handwriting movements have a beneficial impact on the brain's connectivity patterns related to learning and remembering," end quote. So I did have some limitations. I had a bunch of limitations to this study. One was that my assessment was completely content-based. I wish that I had included some contextual prompts to get more kind of ingrained information from what they walked away from the Roman architecture, ancient Roman architecture video. So I would include that as one of my limitations. Another limitation was I had a fairly small homogeneous participant group. The adults had about a similar educational background. So a larger, more diverse demographic, including larger gender and age diversity, would have been beneficial in the transferability of results, maybe. And another limitation that I saw kind of afterwards is that the preliminary survey could have been expanded to include more data points. My initial survey was brief, and the inclusion of the following data points like first language, ethnicity, learning differences, or learning limitations, whether they had vision, hearing, or speech limitations, was not included in the initial survey. So I would, if I got to do it again, I would include those variables to have more generalizability of my results. And then the control for technological distraction was another limitation. My participants were permitted to use their own digital devices for note-taking, and there were no controls set up for distraction. So those who were typing could have been doing other things rather than just typing their notes. So that would be another, I see as another limitation. My suggestions for future research, I guess at this point, I really need to stress that this was never intended to be, and I still don't intend it to be, anti-technology. There are so many benefits for students to have access to technology, and digital devices are extremely beneficial for many, many educational activities, including note-taking. My intent is to provide relevant research and some data that supports a more balanced approach to note-taking, providing an opportunity maybe to bring handwriting back to students as an option. Given the cognitive benefits of handwriting, it seems advantageous that students should have real training in multiple note-taking modalities so that the individual has sort of a cache of resources for their own best way to take notes. Another suggestion for future research would be to explore and establish opportunities for schools to reinstitute handwriting as a curricular subject, to kind of commingle the digital and the handwriting. And again, I would say looking for a larger, younger, more diverse demographic could be could really be a good foundation for future research. Is this a generational topic? Is this a generational thing? Or is this something that younger students are also going to support? And future studies could examine the impact of digital distractions associated with multitasking, because that's a real issue in high schools. We put computers in front of our students and they take notes and they're also doing other things. So that's my research, and I thank you so much for your time and attention. And if you took notes, I hope you hand wrote them. I could go on forever, but I'll wrap up with questions. I do have some slides of my references that I utilized during this presentation, and then I'm happy to take questions. Like I said, I could go on forever.
Thanks, Donna. That was great and super interesting. It definitely resonates with me, these findings. Who would
Thank
like
you.
to ask the first question?
Donna, I'm going to hop in here. I too really enjoyed this. And as a person who has always taken notes in writing, I can really appreciate what you're presenting. My question was around the pool of participants. What was the age range of that group?
They were all adults, and I would say, I want to say 18 to like 65. It was definitely an older demographic, primarily male. I was rather limited. I started collecting my data just as COVID began. So my original desire for my demographic pool changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that looking at having the opportunity to look at a younger population. When I was in Dr. Fenster's class, I was able to utilize some of my 18-year-old students, my high school students. I actually got the similar results. It yielded similar results from that first study. But I have arguments with my own children all the time that they say it's a generational thing. Your generation likes to write. I disagree. I think it's something that's going on in the brain. And I think that the youngsters that have been only raised, my youngest grandchildren have no handwriting training at all, none. There is nothing in their elementary schools that is anything related to penmanship or handwriting. And our high schoolers here, their handwriting is challenging.
Right.
We have to ask the question in like IEP meetings, if you can't sign your name, you can print. And that's concerning. It's just concerning that they don't have that as an option.
Yeah. I
So
agree.
hopefully I answered your question there.
Yeah,
is-
no,
yep,
yes, you
yeah.
did. And I guess for me, I always write because I'm not a very good typist. So I would be terrible if I tried to type the notes and listen and do all the things. So for me, it's just, and I wonder if a lot of people in my age range would have that same experience, that it's just more a knowledge of how to type or facility with typing. But just a quick aside, my niece this week was sworn in at the Supreme Court in Maryland, as a lawyer, and she was in line to sign her name, and the gentleman before her turned around and said, "I'm not sure I know how to sign my name."
Yeah,
And it was like,
yeah,
what?
that's
Now,
exactly, yeah,
it,
that's,
and it may have been, facetious in some ways, but I think it gets to the point you're making that, and it seems like an uphill slog to change things in terms of really making changes in curriculum to include
yes,
handwriting.
yes. And the typing, I didn't mention in my presentation today, but it is in my research that most of the time when people are trying to type, or the information that I've read and what I see, typing tends to be something that we think we can do at the same rate that someone is speaking. So
Right.
rather than processing, which is what handwriting makes you do, because you cannot write as fast as the fact that you're clicking away, you think you're capturing verbatim, you're really not.
Right.
But there's more of a chance that you are, I guess. I
Right.
don't know. So I think that's an issue as well.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We can't hear you, Kathy. I don't know why. I don't see mute. Maybe a mic came unplugged or something. Maybe put it in the chat. Still can't hear you. Can I ask a question while we're waiting for Kathy's comment or her microphone, one or the other? Like this, it's interesting. Like the last time I taught a stats class, I wanted students to actually do calculation on paper. So I like handed out a paper because I was thinking also like there's this brain hand connection or something that has to do with processing. But is it, I mean, your study is just about note taking, but in the literature, do people distinguish the benefit of, learning activities versus just note taking for later recall? I mean, it seems to me that if there is some sort of age effect, it might be because, I'm Gen X. I learned to be literate by writing. Remember the tablet
Right.
paper? I don't even
Right,
know.
right.
Like, how do kids not know how to sign their name? Don't they still have to write letters?
No,
Get out of here.
that's what's disturbing right now. And I see it with students who are we have agenda books that we still utilize for our ninth graders, right? And I'm like, do you write your homework down? Because writing it down not only makes it you can go back and review and access it on that from that agenda book, but it also kind of left a little memory. Like when I write things down, I can almost see where I put it on the paper, or like if I'm doing it in colors, I can remember that I wrote that in blue and I wrote that in red. So that that visual aspect that happens in your brain. I did read one study. I tried to really focus on note taking because I kept getting too broad. But one study was about math and the impact that writing out math equations had. And it was very positive that handwriting was more effectual, more productive than typing. A side note is everything has gone digital. So all of I'm going to administer about 2,300 AP exams this year, and they're all digital.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I just don't know that's where we get the best recall or the best learning or the best, I just don't. I still, and is that generational? I'm kind of older, so it could be, but I do not think it is benefiting our kids. I don't. So this was a topic of it has been for a long time. Like I was in Dr. Fenster's class almost a decade ago, and it was my interest then, and it still is my interest. If you write it down, you will likely remember. Write it down in your agenda book. You can then check it, but it also is that kind of imprint in the brain. So yeah, I didn't get to, there's so many things that I would like to continue to understand, like the loss of cursive writing. And I do a little thing in the beginning of my classes at the beginning of the school year where I ask my seniors if they can transcribe. And I just take something like from it's just a statement from anything. It could be, and I write it in cursive, and most of them cannot transcribe that. So it's not that they can't write it, they can't even read it.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make me think like cursive writing is more of an art. I was never good at it. That was like the only thing I ever got bad grades in was writing. And my
Kathy's
dad said,
statement is-
"Don't worry, little Rachel. When you grow up, it'll just be everything will be digital, you know,
Right.
or STEM." And he could see the future in that way. But this, so maybe you want to rebut Kathy's argument in the chat if you want to take a minute to read that.
Sure. I don't know if I can see it.
Just at the bottom of the screen, you should have a button for chat. It should be in there at the end.
Oh, got it.
You can also stop sharing. Maybe it'd be easier.
Handwriting is old fashioned, and in my perspective, I don't, you know what? That is exactly my kid's argument as well. So I'm 100% like I've had to work against that. I do think that having the option to understand how you learn best when we have taken the option of handwriting away. Yes, it is old fashioned. And is it something that's going to go away? I hope not. I read a book called The Hand, and I'm not going to be able to tell you because I'm still a little nervous who wrote it, but the author connects that fine motor processing of handwriting with other activities that we do that kind of set us apart from, animals kind of in a way, and things like brushing your teeth and holding a fork and all fine motor skills that I just don't know that we don't need to keep practicing those fine motor skills. There were some studies that I read that connected and did some fMRI studies with them that connected reading and handwriting for really young, like 3, 4, 5-year-olds, and how that was connected. And I think that there are neural pathways that are dependent upon that fine motor structure. So whether you actually take notes when you're in college via handwriting or typing, I think you should have the option to do it. I think you should have the training to do it. And right now, I don't think the training occurs. I think handwriting is, it's a diminishing activity. It's no longer a curricular class in any place except the Catholic school where my 2 youngest grandchildren are. Like, that's it. Like right now, that's the end of it. But I don't disagree with you. I think there are, we have moved away from it. As I said, all testing, and we test the daylights out of our kids in high school, and all testing is digital now. I don't think it's the best, but I don't have control over that. So we test digitally, and every kid has a device. And when you're in the classroom, I was in a PE class today, and there is students sitting on the floor taking notes on their digital devices in a PE class. I'm like, really? So that's it. That's where we are. So thank you so much. I appreciate your question. And like I said, I could go on talking about this forever.
Yeah, it is really interesting, but I think for the sake of time, we're gonna put you in a waiting room and then have a discussion.
Okay,
Let me make sure I know how to do that. All right, here we go.
Can
We'll
we
call you
stop
back in-
sharing?
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, we'll call you back in a few.